Okay, thank you very much, and good morning, everyone. Maybe I need to explain a little bit why it's from Hong Kong. I'm actually working in the Hong Kong government as on the strategy advisory for the Digital 21. So that is maybe similar to your committee thinking about future governance issues and also about the future issues on the digital economy. And I'm regular in India because I'm teaching at the University of Mysore, Information Economics and Knowledge Economy. So that's why I'm in India quite often, yeah. Just as a background. The topic I want to discuss is maybe a topic that we have not addressed so far, and I think it goes a little bit beyond e-governance. It is the whole issue that comes after e-governance, and that is open data. And this is a big topic in the international circles, and I believe in Indian government there are also a few people involved in this, but it is not yet, I think, a mainstream topic in the e-governance discourse so far. So basically there are these two issues here. Public sector information is one term, it's a kind of a technical term, but maybe you are more familiar with open data or public domain or also information commons. What this is about really is the OECD gives a definition that public sector information is everything, all data and information that is produced by public bodies. And that's, of course, a huge amount of information. If you think of India, this is not only state agencies, but also local agencies, semi-public organizations, universities, research institutes. So probably this is several 10,000 organizations. And all of these organizations produce as a mandate or as their very reason for being some sort of information. Some of this information is valuable, some of it may not be valuable. But you may say the very purpose of public organization is collecting and curating information, because that's what you need for policy making. And India has already RTI, that was in 2005. And RTI is maybe the first step, but RTI is more about access to information and the right to access of information. And PSI, or open data, is the next step, that is creating economic value from information. So it's not only do citizens and business have the right to information, it's also you should use this as a raw material to create new services and applications. So the economic perspective is really maybe the new thing that comes into this whole discussion. So yeah, the economic value creation. And to give you a quick example, the weather information. This is from Europe here. Weather information typically is a government monopoly, so probably you have also the India Meteorological Institute. And who owns this information? I mean, there are all these experts who are collecting this information, and they are also, people can go to the website and check the weather and so on. But the weather data itself, the raw material, not the reports, who owns this information? And from the Netherlands, which is a small European country, before the Open Data Initiative, this was a 15 million euro market. That means the National Weather Office sold the data to news agencies and publishers and everyone who wants to have this information. They employed 30 people, and so it was one company or one public organization. After, it became mandatory for the government agency to release that data to anybody who wants it, to the raw data. So if you are an iPhone application developer, you could use that data to create your own weather report for hiking, for hikers, or for people in a certain region. So after that opening, the market was 180 million. So there were many, many more players, private players, but also scientific players. And the total weather market now employs 160 people, and there are more than 40 companies. And the economic reasoning here is that the income tax on 180 million euro is, of course, higher than the 15 million euro that the government agency collected in selling that information. Okay? So that is maybe, in simple words, the whole story. Why many governments are so excited about open data. It is a raw material that is produced by the government as part of the work, and now suddenly it can create additional economic value. And I'm very interested in India because it is just India is such a huge market of information. So the market is, of course, much, much larger than the one in the Netherlands. And to give you another example here, this is a combination of geospatial information and information of pictures in the city archive. So these are two different data sets. One is in a museum or in a city archive. The other one is geospatial information, two different government agencies. And so now a third party, a private company, mashes up the data and creates a new service for visitors to the city or for tourists and so on. So you can walk into a city, or imagine you walk down Lodi Road and you see a nice building and you want to know what is this building, and then you can, on your iPhone, you can get an application that tells you about the history and so on. That's quite a nice application. So there is a lot of new business built on open data. Transport information is one of the hottest topics, real-time transport information, health information, statistical information, legal information is a huge market in Europe and also in the US, environmental information. So think about all the opportunities if you mix and match the data sets, because they are all open format, open source, and everybody can use it free of charge. Oh, so that's why I skipped maybe. Yeah. Oh, sorry, I think I skipped some slides. I'm sorry. So you can see that this is a big market. And I believe in India, where's the mouse here? I believe in India there is so far this, your electronic services delivery bill is something on the way to, can you just help me to make it big? I think the electronic services delivery bill is the next step towards open data, but it is not yet something comparable to open data legislation in the US or in Europe. So open data can create value if used. Information non-used has no economic value, and open data can also be considered the raw material of knowledge-based society, because once produced, it's already paid by the taxpayer. The reproduction costs are close to zero. And that is this reuse of business and individuals for commercial or non-commercial purpose. And for this, we need a governance framework, because if you cannot build a business if you are not sure whether you can use the data or not. In the old days, maybe in some countries we still have old days, but public sector information was only available on request or on a need-to-know basis. So I still remember in many nations you still have to write to a letter, why do you want the data, what for, and so on. And access to open data was restricted. And also the government had the idea that they owned the information. You know, we produce it, it's our information. And there was a lot of focus on e-government, which is more or less only focusing on transactional information processes, but not on new content or new services. And all this changed, I would say, in a drastic way in 2008 at this meeting of the OECD in Seoul, where there were also many observers from emerging economies, and I remember there was also a whole delegation from the Indian government, when the OECD recommended for knowledge economies to completely open up public sector information and content and let anybody who wants to reuse it, as this is kind of the basis for digital economies. Openness is the default rule to facilitate access and reuse of data. And this comes, of course, for many countries. There's a whole bunch of questions which I'm not going into detail here. You can read it in this document, how do you create an asset list? What about data quality? Is the data ready? We just heard some of the data may still exist on paper. It's not in the digital space. And also what kind of redress mechanism are there? So all this, there needs to be some kind of law, and most countries have a law now. OECD has only recommendations because it's only an international organization. And the economic value, just to show you, in the USA, the market for information is a 700 billion euro market, I translate it to euro, and in Europe it's 68 billion. And Europe basically created this law because they saw that in information markets, it's so much lagging behind the US. Interestingly, for the economic value of PSI in India, we have no figure whatsoever. I don't know, it's very surprising. I asked several professors of economic institutes, but obviously nobody has looked into this. What do you think? It's also probably many crores of economic value. And internationally, there are only relatively few countries that have already legislation for mandatory open data of public information, which is basically OECD countries, US, and one country in Africa, this is Kenya. So this is the official data.gov site of the US government, and the Indian government will have data.gov.india, and the other countries then have data.gov.something, their country name. And in the international data community, there's a little bit of complaint because it does not say data.gov.us, but the US in their thinking, they think they are the first one, so they just claim this main domain. This is the site for New York. New York is the first city in the world that Michael Bloomberg in March 2012 has a law that all federal all agencies in the city must publish their data in open access format. And you can see, and the reason for this is to produce these made in machine-readable formats so that many new services for the city can be created. And in Australia, same situation. As in 2008, an economist had a review on the national information policy and also mandated this open information. In Europe, we have a law, or directive as we call it. It's a directive from 2003. And you can see all these countries in Europe have to comply with it. They have to comply and translate the European directive into national law. Some are doing this quite well, others don't, but it is mandatory. And to show you one of the examples, yesterday somebody mentioned about the geospatial information in India, that there will also be a big portal for all this information. This is something that has already happened in Europe. This is GeoPortal. So any software developer or any researcher can download the data in Excel or in other formats and create your own maps. So it is the mapping data that we are interested in. And this is our information minister, the commissioner of the. She is also 65, by the way, and she is a very strong advocate for open data. She's really pushing it a lot, yeah. Okay, and before the situation in many countries was that if you had to go to you want to buy geospatial data, then you had all these pricing mechanisms. And for instance, the streets of Vienna cost 1,300 euro, and then you have download it. That's all gone. Okay, and there are many economists who said, okay, now the government may lose some money because you cannot sell the information anymore, but there will be much more return because you are creating so many new opportunities. And now the digital open data map here, as an example, is free for anyone to use. Yeah, I skipped this one. And same in London. In London is also a data store. So you can buy data sets of the London police, of the London health hospitals, and so on, and create applications. So in London, this whole movement was led by two journalists of The Guardian, because London is actually also quite late in open information, only in right to information. Only in 2001 did they have their law to have open information. Okay, and this is from a recent meeting in Washington with the federal government and the World Bank and communities. So what we see all over the world, that citizens, civil society organization, business, big and small, Microsoft is always there, HP and all the consultants and so on, and the government, they sit together and think about and have these hacking weekends and where you jointly think about what can we do with this data. Okay, so to summarize, there are a couple of the benefits of open information. There are direct and indirect economic benefits. First of all, we are creating a whole new market for information. So and that's maybe something that economists get excited about, because the information and data is already there. But now, if we open it, there will be many more players in that market, and to create a whole new market. And social benefits, of course, are like citizens have more trust in the information. So we have, for instance, in Germany, we have many open data applications about public procurement. So so it's very transparent what the government spends exactly on what. So you can see not only the tenders, but also the result of the tenders and where the money goes. Or, for instance, subsidies for agriculture. Now you can clearly see, okay, because everybody thinks the European wastes too much on agriculture, so now you can exactly see what happens to that money, because there are some civil organizations who are tracing that money and publish it on the website. At policy level, these developments I think, require a complete shift in thinking about the role of government, practices, legislation, and mindset. And I think this will take a while. And we also need to think about how do we adapt our other laws in the digital age, like personal data protection law, RTI laws, access and archives and access law, copyright laws. In many countries, the government owns the copyright on their information. I don't know the situation in India. I think it's mixed. Sometimes I see a copyright note, sometimes there's nothing. And also the financial issues. So each country has its own information policy and laws regarding to the public data. And so I think what is really important beyond e-governance, we also need to think about the wider picture of if we are in a knowledge-based economy, how do we shape this environment where information and data is the most important resource? But we must change quite a few laws to enable economic benefits. Okay, thank you very much. Yeah.